So speaking of the lifestyle prescriptions, I can think of some of the other ones that I've given. This is not a popular one with the teens, but a reduction in screen time.
Yeah, I agree.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Jessica Carfagnini, naturopathic doctor, and we're here at Thunder Bay Naturopathic Clinic today with Dr. Caroline Meyer, naturopathic doctor, who is still based in Toronto, but is coming up to Thunder Bay on a regular basis to see patients. And she has a special interest in pediatrics and mental health, and we're very excited to have her join us.
I'm excited to be here. I've always loved Thunder Bay, and this is a perfect way to introduce myself to the community and considering moving here. So I just want to see if I can, what the community is like and whether I can handle the Thunder Bay winter. Being from Toronto, I'm not sure about that.
You just got to get the skis and you'll be fine.
Okay. I trust you. I've been in practice for 16 years now. Awesome. And but had to focus on pediatrics almost from the outset. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of by accident that I got involved with pediatrics. I just was in the area of Toronto that had, I think, the highest per capita number of children. So I saw a lot of kids and a lot of families, and I absolutely loved it. And here I am 16 years later and still passionate about pediatrics.
So we're going to talk about teen mental health. Tell me about what you've been seeing with your teenage patients recently.
Well, I'd say since the pandemic started, I've been seeing more kids with anxiety, like serious anxiety, depression, cutting behavior, OCD, like obsessive compulsive disorder, eating disorders, even substance use.
Absolutely. So when you say anxiety, how does that manifest?
Yeah, sometimes teens don't identify as being anxious, but they have like a chronic stomach ache or headaches that suddenly have come up. So sometimes it manifests more as physical symptoms. When you dig it a little deeper, you realize, okay, it's more related to their mental health.
That's interesting that you see that with teenagers as well, because I remember back to my naturopathic college days being taught in our pediatrics course that a lot of times children will describe any manner of issue as a stomach ache.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense because all of us as humans, I mean, we have so many serotonin receptors in our gut, and we have those expressions, right? Like I felt punched in the gut when I got the bad news. It makes sense that children and teens and even some of my adult patients do describe that,
Yeah, butterflies in your stomach or,
Exactly. So it's interesting because anxiety is, it's a label and not everyone's comfortable with that label.
Yeah.
And there's so many different kinds, there's social anxiety, and definitely the social anxiety has gone up because of being in and out of lockdowns as well.
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So being socially awkward to begin with, and then you're separated from your friends, and now you're having to relate to everyone on screens, or you're not connecting with people in the same way or as much. That just exacerbates anxiety.
Absolutely. And you think of these teenagers who, they were in grade 9 when the schools got shut down, so they missed half of grade 9, and then they missed half of grade 10. And I mean, in Ontario, we've had the most school closures out of any province, any state. I think anywhere in the world is what I heard.
I think so.
It's been a lot of school closures. And we can't fool ourselves. Online schooling was not a one-for-one replacement for the in-person school experience. I think we all know that.
I would say a small minority of the patients of mine found it a positive experience.
Yeah. Some of the introverts did really well.
Yeah. But I would say most students and most of my patients did not do well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The term languishing came up a lot.
Yes.
When parents were describing what their teens were dealing with, they were just languishing and then
scrolling through social media, which is not usually a positive thing for your
not usually
for your mental health. So that was a big concern.
And sports programs being
Yes.
canceled. That was big. You know, I can think of certain patients of mine who, you know, they were into hockey or gymnastics or indoor soccer, and that's all gone.
Yeah.
And those sports, being active, was one of the primary ways that they kept their mental health positive and stable.
Yeah. It's my number one prescription for anxiety, depression is like, get moving.
Get moving, absolutely.
And nature too. I think that has even more positive effects. Like being in nature, being active, like definitely helps with your mood.
And that's good for us to tell people about, because I think when people hear, okay, naturopathic doctors, like, okay, you have natural things, like maybe you're going to prescribe me a vitamin or a plant medicine. And sure, yeah, we have vitamins, we have plant medicines, but the lifestyle pieces are huge. I often will prescribe this YouTube video, and I'm not trying to get people on screens more or anything, but there's this neat video. I probably learned about it in naturopathic college, but it's called 23 and a half hours with, and it's done by Dr. Mike Evans.
Okay.
So this is a medical doctor who's examining the research on exercise as an intervention. And it's kind of neat. He's scribbling on the whiteboard and saying, you know, what if I told you I had this like amazing medical intervention that, you know, reduced anxiety by 48%, reduced depression by 52%. He goes on to cover other health issues in this video as well. And then he explains that it's 30 minutes of walking per day. You don't have to be training for the 10-mile road race or anything like that. That just really get moving. Yeah,
I think people are surprised that I prescribe that, but I actually write it down, the prescription. And I was similarly reading about, in an article about a disorder called exercise deficiency disorder.
Oh, well, it makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good concept. I agree. The lifestyle, the daily habits are really important to attend to boost someone's mental health. And, you know, teens have had their daily habits just turned upside down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So speaking of the lifestyle prescriptions, I can think of some of the other ones that I've given to my teenage patients who are struggling with anxiety and depression. So one of them is I've prescribed, this is not a popular one with the teens, but a reduction in screen time.
Yeah, I agree.
Some of these young people are like, they're on screens for school, but then they also socialize on screens. And when that's their only option because of being in lockdown, it's really tough to get them off screens.
Yeah, and then they take their phone upstairs to the bedroom, and then they're on, they're scrolling through different things on TikTok and Instagram. Yeah,
all these things that I'm trying to catch up with.
Yeah, and I think also, too, it's important to understand how they're using screens and social media, because there can be positive aspects of screens and social media and very negative ones.
Yeah, and parents need to be involved.
Yeah.
And yet teenagers, depending on their age, because there's a vast range of development in there, are often trying to get more independence from their parents. So it's a tricky balance.
Yeah, it's tricky to keep that line of communication open. But I think it's really important. And not necessarily going in with like, okay, you got to have less screen time and let's have a fight about it, but let's have a discussion about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about what's reasonable.
Yeah.
I find I sometimes almost feel like a mediator, right? When I have like a parent and a teenager in front of me. The teenager's the patient, but the parent's there to support. And we're having a discussion about screen time. It's a bit of a negotiation process.
Exactly, yeah.
And so usually start small, like, can you, at least protect that hour before bedtime, right? Because as we know, a blue screen will inhibit melatonin production in the brain and make it harder to fall asleep.
Yeah, and if you're on social media, on your smartphone, you're also increasing your cortisol generally. You're more active at night, and that's when your stress hormone should be the lowest and your melatonin should be high. So there's many aspects of it.
Yeah. I've sometimes prescribed those amber glasses as well, the ones that filter blue light, especially for the older teenagers who are working hard on assignments and maybe they are trying to get stuff done until right before bed. And so I'll say, well, let's try a harm reduction technique here and at least get the amber glasses on for when you're, on your laptop until bedtime.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Try to wind down for about an hour before you actually try to go sleep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So we mentioned a little bit about getting out in nature too.
Yes.
We have a colleague, Dr. Cindy Gilbert, who wrote an amazing book, the Forest Bathing, A Start Here Guide for Beginners. And I love that because it summarizes the research, right? Because there's actually like a pretty good chunk of research on how trees and nature affect humans and human health. So I have a copy here and I often will lend it out to patients for inspiration. And we're lucky here in Thunder Bay because people can go for hikes, they can go sit with the cedar trees like pretty easily.
Yes.
So I've been known to prescribe hikes and forest bathing and all of that, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah. Even in Toronto, it's not as nature focused, but there's a big park beside my office.
You have High Park there.
Yeah. Sometimes I have my patient visits out in the park.
Oh, you do? That's amazing.
We walk around and we do mindfulness techniques and exercises, and
I think we might want to start considering that here.
We could do that around here.
Yeah, sure. Like what would appointments look like out in nature?
Yeah, I think and it's interesting. Patients of the teen patients, they tend to talk about different things when we're actually walking in the park.
That's an interesting insight, right? Because the experience of sitting in a clinic, in a treatment room with a naturopathic doctor would be very different than the experience of walking down a path, a treed path with your ND.
Yeah. It's worth considering, especially in Thunder Bay.
Yeah, it's true. We have access to lots of nature here.
Yeah.
So what about diet and food? And how does that affect teen mental health?
Well, certainly lots of studies showing that the more highly processed your diet is, the more susceptible you are to anxiety and depression and OCD to some extent. So looking at the diet, trying to, again, like harm reduction with the smartphone screen time, just kind of gradually moving them into trying to eat more, whole foods, vegetables, fruits.
Yeah.
Paying more attention to their diet.
Every bit counts, right?
Yeah, and I think teenagers are actually pretty aware of what they're eating.
Oh, yeah. Many of them are quite insightful. And many of my teenage patients will come to the appointments on their own as well, especially once they get to know me. And then I get a lot of insight into what the parents are eating. And sometimes it's the teenagers says, I want to eat more fruits. I want to eat more vegetables. And then I say, well, you know what? This is like, you might not be the one funding the grocery trips at this point, but you can certainly contribute to the list and you can offer to cook and bring the whole family along with you.
Yeah,
right?
I totally agree. Sometimes a teen is leading the family into a healthier diet. I mean, that's why I love treating kids and teens, because often the whole family experiences better health.
Absolutely, because everyone's living together and health is experienced in that family matrix and in the community as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did some work with the schools. I went into my daughter's classroom a few years ago when she was in senior kindergarten to do a little lecture about nutrition in French, no less. I got my old rusty French skills out. But it's interesting because, food really is... It's family, it's community, it goes beyond that one individual. Yeah.
And, kids are often interested in where their food comes from,
Exactly.
And teaching them about, farms and, how food is grown. Yeah. Understanding the food chain and distribution systems, and they're kind of into that.
Totally. Well, it's interesting stuff.
At the same time, there is sugar addiction, and that's something too.
Sugar addiction's real.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it can be fierce sometimes.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you've experienced that.
I've experienced it personally, and I've experienced it with my son.
Yeah. So that is a thing. And that takes some time to kind of break that.
Yeah, because the brain really will crave sugar, because looking at it from an evolutionary perspective, our brains are programmed to get the high sugar foods and then store them as fat cells to try to survive the next famine.
Yeah.
Right.
And they taste good.
And they taste delicious. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about botanical medicine and what we have at our disposal for anxiety and for depression. What are some of your favorite tinctures or teas to prescribe?
For teens.
For teens,
with anxiety. I think rhodiola is a great herb for both anxiety and certainly depression.
Yeah. And fatigue too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Also working with their sleep, because I would say every teen I know is sleep deprived. But
that's a big statement, and I completely agree. We don't actually realize how much sleep teenagers need.
Yeah.
And a lot of times as a society, we treat them like mini adults, but they're not. Like, they're just going through rapid, like, physical development, hormonal changes, brain development, and they need that sleep.
Yeah, they need that restorative
Like, how many
sleep.
hours per night would you say is, like,
I would
reasonable?
Say 8 to 9, maybe even 10.
10 for some kids, because there is a range.
Yeah.
Some kids function well on 8, but other kids will need 10 hours.
Yeah, I think that's the range. And I'd say very few kids in my practice reach that, because they feel okay. But are they okay? Yeah.
Probably not. And a lot of adults too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I read a study recently that looked at just very modest sleep deprivation. So the intervention was only 6 hours of sleep per night for 10 nights in a row. And the subjects, the people, they were adults in this case, they felt fine, but on cognitive tests, they scored way lower. So the conclusion is you might feel okay, but your brain's not functioning very well if you're only getting 6 hours of sleep a night. So that's a bit scary if you're not aware of it.
Yeah.
But your brain's really not doing well.
Yeah, yeah. And if you get behind a wheel of a car, and you're not cognitively all there. Yeah.
I thought a lot about that when I was in my postpartum days and I was sleep deprived because I had a baby. And I thought, how many people are sleep deprived and are driving? It was a bit scary.
Yeah, it's scary to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, in terms of sleep, October, November are my favorite times of the year here in Thunder Bay to help patients maximize their sleep because it's getting darker earlier, it's cold. Are there any tips that you offer to teens to help them get a good night's sleep?
Well, I think it goes back to that having a nighttime routine and kind of reverse engineering when you want to get to sleep, like think about what you want to do an hour before that.
Winding down, right?
Yeah, and sometimes, again in the pandemic, I find a lot of teens are staying up to 1, 2 in the morning on the regular. So it's not realistic. They're going to suddenly start going to bed at 10 or 11.
Right.
So
you can't flip it that quickly.
Not usually. It's like having jet lag, essentially. So you want to, change the sleep to an earlier time, just gradually, maybe 15, 20 minutes at a time. And then, and then teenagers, I find, feel better. They were fine before, when they were getting 6 hours of sleep, but now they're like, oh, I'm actually paying attention in class and
retaining more. Yeah. It's not as hard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have more energy after school to hang out with friends. So
totally.
I think once they see the payoff of sleeping a little bit more, they're more invested in it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I sometimes prescribe melatonin because I find that can help. Not everyone tolerates it well, but it's pretty cost-effective intervention and very
there's lots
safe.
of herbs that can be helpful.
Yeah, passion flower is something that comes up in my practice a lot. What else do you use for
I might use tilia, which is linden, lemon balm, lavender.
Yeah, even there's lavender essential oils in the pillow, and you can even swallow encapsulated lavender now.
Yeah.
With a potential side effect of lavender burps.
Yeah, that is the potential downside.
Yeah. We also just ordered more chamomile catnip blend for the clinic because I'm finding that a lot of my patients are needing that because everything ramped back up in September with school and activities, and people are finding their nervous systems are like really fired up. And so needing something to just wind down in the evenings.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and that's everyone, not just teens who are dealing with anxiety, but we all need to take care of our nervous systems.
Even little ones,
Yeah.
Yeah. because it's exciting to go back to school, but it can be overwhelming for the nervous system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the discussion today.
Yeah,
that was
thank you
really
for,
fun.
Yeah.